Good afternoon, everybody. Today on Menstrual Hygiene Day, Dailyhunt and MASH are hosting this panel, Menstrual Hygiene, Current Scenario, Challenges and the Future. I'm Tanya Kathuria, Programs Manager at MASH Project Foundation, and we have some amazing panelists today to talk about menstrual hygiene and what are the current initiatives being followed in the country, what they have been doing, and what as menstruators we need to be careful of. So please welcome me in joining a very exciting and amazing panelists today. First up, we have Alakshi Tomar. Alakshi is the co-founder of the True Company and a venture builder at Build3. She's working very closely at the intersection of impact, gender, and education and sexual health. Hi, Alakshi. Very great to have you here today.
Hey, Tanya. Really happy to be here.
Next up, we have Vasundra Pandey. Vasundra Pandey is a gender and menstrual health educator. She is also studying gender at the University of London. She has also headed a lot of feminist organizations in terms of communications. We are very equally excited to have her on the panel today. Hi, Vasundra.
I think I'm on mute. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, Vasundra, we can hear you.
Okay, let me set my camera.
Great. So next up we have Mitali. Mitali is a young change maker from Bihar. She's doing a bachelor's in mass communication, a very young change maker who's interested in women-led initiatives and causes, and she is also the ambassador for the Khud Se Pooche program. Hi, Mitali.
Hello, hi everyone.
Hi, Mitali. Great to have you here today. Lastly, and not leastly, we have Prakshi Saha. Prakshi Saha is the founder and the director of Her Adhikar Foundation, and she has been working with feminist non-profit organizations for the past 4 years. Hi, Prakshi. Great to have you here today.
Hi, thank you for inviting me.
Mitali, can you please mute and switch your camera on? Great. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Okay. Great. You can please mute yourself, Mitali. There's a lot of background noise. Thank you so much. Okay, so it's very exciting to have all of you here today, coming from different walks of life, have been leading a lot of feminist organizations in terms of menstrual hygiene, also doing a lot of groundwork as well. So it's going to be very exciting to see what kind of aspects come up. So just to have a little understanding of where you come from, your background, and I'm sure the audience watching us is also very interested to know where you come from and how you actually got into the women wellness and health sector, and what was that eureka moment for you. What was that personal anecdote that actually got you into this sector? So why don't we start with Alakshi?
Hey, thanks, Tanya. So I always say that there's never one moment. I think it's always a build-up of moments. For me, I started my journey in the corporate space, working with Accenture, sort of got disillusioned there, then moved to a fellowship called the Gandhi Fellowship. I used to work with like government schools and headmasters, teachers in slum communities of Mumbai. So there I got exposure to a very different kind of world. But specifically, if you see like the multiple sets of incidents that led me to this sector, I think one I remember is I was working in an area called Dumping Ground where almost most of Bombay's waste is literally deposited there. So you can see like buildings high waste just piled up. So I think that's where like it struck me about, and there were people living there, living off those scraps literally day by day. A lot of the students from my school used to come from there. So it sort of gave me a little consciousness around the kind of waste that we generate. It's all our houses that is generating this waste, and then there are these people living there. So just made me reflect on that. And then I think as I was doing one of my projects, I realized a lot of young girls were dropping out. And one of the reasons came out to be as soon as they hit puberty and start menstruating, they start dropping out of school. So that really struck me because for us, menstruation was not talked about, but it was never like a inhibitor into something. And then look at the sanitation facilities within Bombay slums. I think bit by bit I realized that menstruation and sexual and reproductive health seems to be connecting everywhere. And the bigger umbrella is sustainability, which is why True Cup works on knowledge and products for menstruation. That's where we realized a menstrual cup is such a great product to break the taboo as well as educate people. And now my work around building more sustainable organizations with other founders. So yeah, that's like a glimpse of the journey. I'll try to keep this quick. So yeah.
That's very nice to hear, Lakshi. And I think sustainability is something that we all here resonate with, especially as menstruators. We understand the waste that goes into actually menstruating on a monthly basis. So, Mitali, why don't you go next and tell us how you got into Khud Se Pooche and how the experience has been for you?
Yes, I got by personally. I feel very, I face lots of problem during my teenage regarding this. My mama told me lots of things, and usually I used to drop the pads here and there because we are teaching. We have to teach like that. Ki you have to drop that on the road under poly bag. But when I grow up, I realized no, this is not the right thing to go because I was that here and there. That's really unhygienic, and I also face a health dignity issues like harassment in hospital, etc. Then it's like let's raise a voice because after every this kind of situation, I always ask a question to me that why don't you raise your voice every time, each and every time, and it's a multiple time where I face these kind of situation. So I found the right platform, that is Khud Se Pooche program, where we firstly I go there uh, as a participant, and then I become an ambassador there. And the Khud Se Pooche program is working on the health dignity of the woman, the problem faced by them on, especially on hospitals and the facilities provided to them in here and there places and public places. So that's
Thank you, Mitali. I think that's a very important aspect that a lot of people forget, that there's a lot of issues that come up when we go for medical exams and checkups, especially with menstruators, whatever gender they may be. It's very important to acknowledge that it's not just a homebound thing, it's something that's in the society. So, Vasundra, why don't you give us a little bit of perspective on why you started?
Hi everyone. Thank you, Tanya, and happy Menstrual Hygiene Day. Yeah, so as I actually agree with Alakshi on this, that there is not one eureka moment when when if you have that epiphany that you will be a menstrual health educator. In fact, back in 20 13 30, when I actually started working around this, I didn't even know something like that it did exist. There were a couple of incidences in university when I was traveling, and as a menstruator I faced a lot of like issues while I was traveling, while I was on the go as a woman, when I was in going to the university. What if I could not find a pad, if I needed a sanitary napkin, if I needed one. Nobody really helped you even if you're on the go, I felt. Then I found out, like Alakshi found out, that there are so many women, girls, young girls, who are dropping out of schools when they when their period starts. So that was one of the moment when I found out, through a lot of like workers whom you meet in your society, whom you meet otherwise. And so I started talking to a lot of women from these urban slums in Haryana. Then we made a group of these women. We started going and talking to them, and yeah, and then from there on, I started working. I had an independent project in Haryana itself, where I was working with a lot of gynecologists, a lot of pharmacies, and so we were trying to distribute sanitary napkins and hold very small workshops, which was like a better, like it was like a group of women sitting and talking, so that it doesn't become like an event for them, and they don't become too uncomfortable. And then from there onwards, I also started working with a lot of NGOs, and yeah, so and one thing led to another, I think.
Very interesting. I think the aspect of community building is also very important here. So thank you for bringing that up, Vasundra. Prakshi, how about you?
Again, I would agree with the other panelists. There was like a series of events. So when I was growing up, again, I got zero menstrual education in school, and it was the taboo was always there. You would just, and I went to an all-girls school. Okay, there was just women around, and still we would whisper about it and just hide that pad under in our pocket. So that was just there, but we lived with it. I didn't realize it was a problem because you just know that's normalized, right? It was, I think I was 16, and I was the volunteering for this nonprofit, where this whole debate around taxing period products came around. And that's when I was introduced to the whole concept of period poverty, that people can't have access to hygienic period products because of financial constraints. And it was such a shocking thing to me, because for us privileged folks from urban spaces, it's unthinkable that you can't afford period products, and that's why you opt for unhygienic methods. And I think back then, 4 5 years ago, the number was around, I think 88% menstruators did not have access. I think number has gone down now, and it was such a shocking number. It like really jolted me, and I was like, how is this happening? How is nobody talking about it? How is this not an issue in policy spaces? And so I started just researching and writing in several places. That's how it started. Then I was a part of a fellowship on sexual and reproductive health rights, which led me to start a campaign on menstrual waste management. Again, I resonated with sustainability as a cause, but I realized, again, for menstruators ourselves, to put the onus on menstruators themselves uh, to opt for sustainable methods might not be the best option always. What if menstruators don't have access to wash facilities properly? So that's why my demand was for municipalities to segregate and treat menstrual waste. And that campaign was supported by 80,000 people. And I met my city mayor, and that was a policy change which I was trying to push. And with my own nonprofit, of course, we started building curriculums for adolescents in schools. We started targeting more marginalized communities. So we did series of workshops with sex workers, because for them prioritizing their sexual and reproductive health is a lot more important. And in urban slums, started distributing sustainable period products. So for every donation or distribution drive, we made sure that we distributed sustainable period products and not plastic pads, which they're going to run out of the supply and go back to the unhygienic methods. So that is something we always made sure to always back up the distribution drives with menstrual health education workshops in local languages, to make it more accessible. So yeah, it's been a process, I would say.
Thank you so much, Prakshi. I actually agree with all of you saying that, yes, it's not a Eureka moment. It's always a process that leads us to think like this. For me personally, also, it was a process. I am also a social impact communicator by nature, and I do talk about these things, whether in my home, whether online, or whether through my work. So I do agree, because when all of us started menstruating at our age, I think there was a lack of information at our time itself, and now we see so many people like you, amazing people like you, coming up with menstrual health education and sexuality education. So yes, very insightful points there. And moving on towards the talk of menstrual hygiene, I mentioned all of you saying that there was not enough talk happening, and right now we see that there are people talking about it, there are initiatives being raised, but it's still not enough. It still needs to go way more to the ground level in more vernacular languages, as Praksha also mentioned. So while we talk about the accessibility and the sharing of relevant information, I would like to know from all of you what you think are the top problems or the top issues that menstruators are facing currently in this socioeconomic environment. It could be accessibility, it could be the fact that there's a lack of wash facilities as well, like Prakshi mentioned. So, very happy to know what you think. Vasundra, why don't you go first?
That's a very good question. Actually, it's a cycle. Uh, there is lack of awareness. There is also lack of accessibility. I mean, those two things are, they do not always go hand in hand. There might be people who want to be, who want to learn more about these things, who want to change their conditions, but they just do not have the accessibility, do not have the resources. As menstruators, what the kind of socioeconomic issues that they face today and they've been facing is pretty much, I mean, even though when we have started talking so much about it, I mean, has it changed in the areas which which where people did not, where people were dropping out from schools, where people were not never talking about it, where people did not have access to period products? I don't really think absolutely, but yes, to an extent it has. Why? Because now there are, as you see, we have four people here who are and there's so many more who are talking about it. And but apart from awareness, I think the thing is that it starts from the beginning. Now we have to unlearn so many things in order to sort of learn, and these new terms and these new things that these menstruators not always are they do not accept it. Like, for example, when you talk about menstrual cups, when I go to a village, for example, I went to a village in Telangana, in Patancheru. I they did not have wash facilities to begin with. They did not have running water. So where does it come now? Hygiene is a big issue for them. They did not have access to pads when I started, so there was no option for me to tell them about tampons, or about cups, about other menstrual other options that they can use to stem their flow. So I started working with them on the existing resources that these menstruators have, which is a piece of cloth. How do you use a piece of cloth hygienically? How can you make your own cloth pad? Things like that. Then we spoke to the the bureaucrat, the district magistrate there in that area, to sort of at least have a tanker in these schools for the girls to be able to go to schools when they are on their period. So it's actually it's a cycle. Like one and not everything goes hand in hand, but yeah, one thing leads to another. There is lack of accessibility, there is lack of then awareness, then and that's what leads to different sexual and reproductive health issues and hygiene problems. And yeah, I mean, I think I would like to hear what others have to say. I would not take any more time.
Yes, that's some very amazing points, because we've noticed how lack of information has been affecting a lot of menstruators, whether it comes to hygiene or access to products. And I think the privileged lot have it better. That's an understatement. So, Alakshi, curious to know what you think.
Yeah. No, man, I think I sort of definitely agree with Vasundra in the sense that I think the two problems, like bucket of problems, remain that, right? Like lack of information and lack of access. Now, depending on, let's say, the geography that you're in, the strata of society that you belong to, then that's where like the variations start coming in. So let's say you're upper middle class, you might have access to some sort of some sort of products, but depending on your family environment, there could be still taboos that you have to live through, right? Like a lot of people are still not allowed in their kitchens, and they have separate utensils. So those kind of problems, I think, continue, like the taboo aspect. But I think the access problem is something that we're like, even the government, even nonprofits, they're actively working on. So that to some extent is getting solved. But again, access only to pads right now, not uh, to the different types of products available, and how do you sort of enable education for making an informed choice, right? So when you come to the knowledge aspect, I think the knowledge aspect across like whatever strata you belong to and whatever location you belong to, I think it's still pretty poor, because our main taboo is around sexual and reproductive health. I think that's what the umbrella people need to look at. That because till the time we're not comfortable talking about sex, our bodies, our what is happening inside our reproductive system, till that time, the problem will stay, because menstruation is closely linked to so many other processes, and your entire body positivity, body comfort, right? So like multiple levels of these problems do exist at different areas, but I think slowly we are getting there. At least we've started talking about menstruation, even though we don't talk about sex, sexual health, reproductive health so openly. um, it's, products wise, as Vasundra was saying, while maybe pads might be more acceptable, I think there's still a lot of resistance towards menstrual cups, even cloth pads for that matter. I did a workshop very recently in Goa, and they've all switched to sanitary napkins. This is mostly like all working women, but they do daily labor work generally. So they've all switched to sanitary napkins now, but the fact that they are dissing on cloth now, because when I spoke about cloth, they were just like, नहीं वो तो गंदा होता है, नहीं इस्तेमाल करना चाहिए, मेरे बच्चे तो सब pads है. So sanitary napkins has become like the fix it for all problems. But what we're not realizing is that this problem is much deeper than just saying कि pad दे के ठीक हो जाएगा. So yeah, I went a little like all over the place, but I think the two problems stay the same. They just manifest in different ways in different areas, which is why solving this problem is also taking so much time, right? It's not as easy as you give one product, distribute it in an area, and your problem is fixed. It's very deep rooted issues that you need to sort of like, yeah, uh, talk through and face, which we're trying to do through our workshops, through our products, and just making it an informed user and informed consumer.
Very agreed. I very agree to that point, because I think it's a conditioning problem as well. Like you mentioned, it's very deep rooted. I think we're all conditioned since our childhood, because our mothers also come from a different generation, or whoever our guardian was or is would be coming from a different generation who did not have the access or information that we have now. So yes, very good point. Prakshi, what about you?
So just I think pulling the strings from what Alakshi was saying about cloth pads. So when I said that I make sure we distribute hygienic sustainable period products in our distribution drives, is because it really stayed with me that you usually giving us them a supply of 1 or 2 months, which is going to run out. So I always wanted to give them something which was going to last them for like 4 5 years at least. So I chose cloth pads because again I thought maybe there might be a little resistance towards cups. So when we started talking about cloth pads, it was a very similar reaction because everybody's just got fixated about sanitary plastic pads being the most accessible method of using, right? And one of the things which I kept telling them to convince them is, oh, this is what I use, because I actually use cloth pads because I was not very comfortable with cups. So when I switched to cloth pads, it really worked for me. Um, so if we talk about the broader issue of product choice, right? People don't have that choice, but menstruators, depending upon say how each of our bodies are different, how our cycles are different. So everybody having access to products which suit their comfort is kind of really important for people who are working in this space also to acknowledge that. I think for a lot of us, we just say, oh, sustainable options are the best, or this is what should be the norm, but like it's very different for each and every person. which makes, again, the problem solving a lot more complicated. Talking about this, current problems which exist in the space of menstrual health, it can be looked at from various levels. So if you look at it from a policy level, just the lack of conversation around it, how it is not considered, though it is a public health issue, it's not considered as a public health issue at all. So, the health department, health ministry, they don't want to address it at all. There are very little facilities available to look after sexual and reproductive health, being available at government hospitals, all of those things. At a policy level, nothing is happening because nobody wants to sit down and discuss, because it's just offices filled with men, so it's not acknowledged at all. At a lower level, in homes or in schools, the stigma exists because it is women or men from the previous generation who has internalized all the stigma, shame, taboo, which they live with, and they just want others to continue as well. They just tell you, oh, you've gotten your periods, this is a product you use, end of the story. Why is it happening? Why so many changes happening in your body? I think puberty can be such a confusing and difficult stage for young people. So just telling them what is happening to their bodies, why is it happening, how to kind of deal with it, tackle with it. So nobody is having these conversations with young people. So it can be such a difficult thing. So the way to go about it, I think, would be mandatory menstrual education in schools. That could be such, because schools are such a important stakeholder in this. If you introduce something in schools, it can reach millions of young girls, right? So it has to be, there's like so many stakeholders involved here: homes, schools, governments, public health facilities. So the problem solving becomes a lot more complicated and too many people involved. So that's why, as Alakshi mentioned rightly, I would agree that it's taking so much time and it's a lot more deep rooted. Yeah.
Thank you, Prakshi. I think the trickle down effect is something that needs to be addressed very urgently in this matter. But Mitali, curious to know what you think, as you're also the youngest here on the panel. I'm also curious to know what your opinions are on the problems that you face currently. I know you mentioned them, but right now, when we talk about wash facilities, like all of the amazing women on the panel mentioned. So, how about you? What do you think?
I think this problem arose from our home, that when we get periods and when there are hormonal changes in our always our parents, our cousins said, जाओ मम्मी को बोलो, अगर पापा को बोल दिया तो क्यों मम्मी को बोलो, पापा ने ये सब करते हैं. तो ऐसा ऑलवेज माई दादी सेड टू डैड कि नहीं, पापा को नहीं बोला, मम्मी को बोलो. So the problem arises from there, that why only mom, why not dad, and why not brother? They also have to know about dad, because they are also born from us. Women born them. So and when I got the period, I was only 11 and a half years old when I got the period. And after some months, it's like periods is a something like a, okay, you are now eligible to marriage and you are responsible. You can handle any responsibility, either it is little or big. So it's like my daddy told me that when I do some mistake, my daddy told me that in Bhojpuri, that कि अभी शादी कर दूंगी तो 2 बच्चे हो जाएंगे तुम्हारे. So it's like that hits me hard, that how can she told me in this younger age, even not at a 12 properly. So that hits me hard. And in his schools also, I saw that pads was not available to the needful uh, जो भी लड़कियां हैं उनको अवेलेबल नहीं है. And in schools also there's no proper disposable system for pads. And that, as Alakshi said, that we are using the comfortable products. So some of my friends uses still clothes because they feel comfortable in that. So it's depend on them. And yeah, I don't know what to say.
Thank you, Mitali. I think you've brought about some very important points, especially when it comes to the conversations that happen at home. And I'm very sorry that you had to go through that kind of an environment also, but I think it's something that needs to be addressed as well. But I think there was a very important point that everyone brought about, which was that menstrual hygiene, while remaining a very hush hush topic, is still something that we as the people here on the panel are still very privileged to have these conversations around people. And while I also understand that this privilege also comes from the fact that we can afford maybe a sustainable product, and we also might be able to do waste management for these said products. So what is that one step, or what is that one advice that you would give, one, to the menstruators who do not have access to this information, to this affordability, and also some steps that the government might also need to take in these areas? I know there's a lot going on at the ground level, and I know that you have also worked in these areas specifically, but when it comes to menstrual hygiene and wash facilities, what is more that can be done? So, Vasundra, why don't you give us your insights?
Um, Firstly, to the menstruators, I wouldn't say that change comes like in a day or in a few hours. It is not possible. It is not possible for me as well to change something about myself. So, it menstruation and the way we manage menstrual hygiene, our own, and the way we try and manage it, the way everyone tries and manages it, is something which is a kind of a habit. It's a behavior pattern. Okay, so to every menstruator who cannot afford, I would say that try and at least start having conversations about it. Try and have a conversation in the next coming few weeks with one person that you feel comfortable talking about these things. And then probably once you yourself are comfortable with the topic, because the menstruator themselves have to be comfortable with menstruation, issues around menstruations, issue men's period blood. A lot of times we ourselves are not very comfortable with it. So that is why there is no conversation that starts. So I think you have yourself has to read I mean I mean, you can talk about it in school, with your friends, with your try and asking questions from your teacher, or anyone for that matter. When you start asking questions, when you start asking questions from yourselves, gather or start gathering resources that can answer these questions for you. I think that's when the change at least will start happening in some time. So these little changes, something that you can do, bring in your day-to-day lives, like start maintaining start managing your period hygienically. At least learn to wash your hands before and after changing whatever product you're using during your period. You dispose your period product used period product well, if you're using a disposable product. These little changes will also make you cognizant of a lot of things around periods. At a policy level, at a government level, I would say it is a long road, and I would say it start with making policies which are for which are favorable for all menstruators and not just for women. I feel that we never address it for trans men also. So it I think it's very important to make period also equal. So yeah, that. And then policy, at a policy level, I think we have to start building policies which are easier for people to understand. How many policies, as there was this time when we were talking about period leaves, period, that we should probably get period leaves when we are working as women. I would say that it make smaller changes. I wouldn't say make a big policy change at a big I'm not saying that. I'm asking for small changes in smaller at smaller levels first, and then that would probably manifest into a bigger change. So yeah, that is what change for me is. That is for even for menstruators, even at a governmental level, even at a policy level. It begins with smaller changes in day-to-day lives first, and then it can manifest into something else. Yeah, and for that it needs a lot of mobilization and mobility. Like from all menstruators. Yeah, so that it becomes a voice.
Yes, the voice is very important here, exactly what we're trying to do as well. So, thank you so much, Vasundra, for that. And I also agree with the fact that small changes can make a big change eventually. And I think that's also the kind of motto that all of you have been working with as well. Small changes can result to a bigger change. So, Alakshi, how about you? What do you think about this?
Yeah. So your question was more individual as well as policy change, right? Got that. Yeah. I think so. Individually, I think Prakshi mentioned this point, right? You put a lot of pressure on the individual a lot of the times that it's all your responsibility. You're the one creating all this waste. So I think just as a person, if we want to, let's say, address the topic of menstruation, two, three pointers. Obviously, switching towards sustainable products is key. Like, I know pads are very convenient. That's the habit that we built in. There are a lot of discomfort in other aspects, other products. But the fact is that you're harming your body when you're using these plastic pads. You're harming the environment. So it just seems counterintuitive why people would do that. So be it cloth pads, be it menstrual cups, be it there are period sponges which are not very famous in India. There's period underwear. There are a lot of options available. So I think exploring and going into these options is key. And then also demanding from companies to you have a voice, you're the consumer, so for them to be more sustainable, for them to stop putting these synthetics and chemicals in their products. So I think just being more vocal and conscious consumers. We do it for our food in a restaurant, so why can't we do it for like our hygiene products, right? So I think just as individuals, I feel there's some shifts that we can do just like on day zero, right? Like read more, talk more, just within your circles, be open. Like if your stomach is hurting, I see so many people in my office sometimes, like stomach's hurting because of cramps, but they'll just be like, oh, my stomach's hurting, but not just saying that it's because of periods. So like simple things like that, right? I think at the policy level, I would like to see that while we spoke a lot about the problems, I think there's a lot of solutions also happening. We've come a long way. So I think we need to focus on making menstruation also a positive issue. Like it's all about positive menstruation, right? Like not the fact that there are no problems, but there is progress being made. So I think from the government point of view, while there are a lot of like attention on this issue, and there are some schemes that have come out, but the free pad distribution, the focus on reducing the cost prices of sanitary napkins, optimizing their supply chains because of a lot of lobbying there. I think that needs to be reversed completely because it's not about the product or solely. It's all about informed choice. So focusing more on the education part, training teachers in government schools so that they can talk about these issues openly in classrooms. It's a very like ground level change, but it comes from policy, it comes from your curriculum, it comes from how you train your teachers, what you focus on, which is the education part. And the second part, the products part, is stop focusing on pads so much, right? Like there are so many other products, there are certain constituencies that are experimenting with other sustainable products like Kerala. They're doing cups, cloth pads, Uttarakhand. So I think diversifying that also would make sense to me at least. So yeah.
Yes, very interesting. And the curriculum part is something I think that should be implemented at a wide range, at a wide regional range as well, which I think is being in a lot of programs. And Khud Puch is actually one of those programs which also enables this. So, Mitali, I think we lost you there because of internet connections for a while. Glad to have you back.
Yes.
Um, so, Mitali, we were just speaking about how menstrual hygiene is still a very privileged aspect for a lot of people. And we were also wondering what your thoughts would be on what are the individual changes that one can bring when it comes to menstrual hygiene. And then at a broader level, what are the changes that can be implemented at a policy level, at a society level. So, happy to hear your thoughts.
Firstly, I thought we should use proper products and proper hygiene, and we should proper dispose that products. That's literally important. And at a community level, I thought that's many organization working on a ground level for this. But if all the organization work together, then they can reach greater people, much more people. Because if one organization is working in a area, then they are providing to such a specific area. Then if that organization also providing for that area, then we are missing some areas. So if organizations are working properly in a guidance and a proper way, तो वो खुद से अगर मिल के काम करते हैं कि अच्छा मैं इस एरिया में कर देता हूँ, मैं इस एरिया में कर देता हूँ, तुम इस एरिया में कर दो, then that was a better option, I thought. Yes, that's it.
Thank you so much, Vitali. I think that's very important to have a cohesive element here as well. But I think that would also come at a policy level, as Elakshi and Vasundra also mentioned. So, Prakshi, what do you think about this?
I think very, very important insights by all three of them. I completely agree with. So, if I have to start of an individual level, I think, again, not putting too much onus on the menstruator, but just as an individual, if there's one piece of advice I would give is just prioritize your body and your health, because I think that is very important. Just if you're in pain, just say it out loud, because I think you're just told to normalize the pain we are in because you're supposed to deal with it, right? But it could be indicative of so many other problems, other disorders you might be having, right? So menstruators prioritizing their health, their bodies, which we as mostly people with uteruses or people with vaginas, if I have to keep it gender neutral, we're just told to not prioritize our health. That's something we're just told. We just live with it because it happens to us all the time. So taking care of our need, the reason you have to be to maintain the hygiene, to use the products which is comfortable for you, which is hygienic, is because of your own self. So that's just one piece of advice for any individual menstruator, whether you're wherever you're situated socio-economically, is just to take care of yourself, because it's important for your well-being more than it being a broader issue of social change or whatever. Just take care of yourself. That would be one advice or suggestion. For policy level, I really believe a lot can be done. Very little changes happening, but a lot can be done. Again, the whole conversation around period leave is reserved for very privileged folks, right? I don't think if a law around period leave is ever becomes a legislation in India, factory workers are going to get that. Like women working in factories, just going to be women in corporates or like offices who are going to get that, who already are like they have the bargaining power to just demand for that leave, right? So the government should focus on like rather basic things, like just government schools having uh, toilets with functional locks and waters. I think those are things which are not there. I remember this young girl from Karnataka campaigning for just government school toilets being in usable conditions, because they were just not in usable conditions. They didn't have locks, they didn't have water. So these are also the related reasons why girls are dropping out, right? So the whole correlation why menstrual health is related to girls dropping out, that is something that has to be tackled from a policy level. No matter how many nonprofits are working or community level, there are educators working, we won't be able to solve that crisis because it involves millions of people. Right now, I think the number is at 23 million girls dropping out every year. So that's a massive number. So no matter how much effort we are putting in from our end in the development social impact sector, this has to come from the top down. So yeah, just making sure that menstruation is not a hindrance or a reason why people don't have access to education, or they are having health problems, is something which the from policy level change has to be made, and it's very, very crucial, I think.
Yes, very important points, Prakshi. I think I agree with actually every point that's been made today. And I think that one thing that we need to also be sure of that the voices are heard. So I'm actually very glad that we had Mitali on board today as well, because we got to hear from someone in a different environment. And while Vasundra, I think you're in the UK right now, so you also come from a different environment. Alakshi, Prakshi, and I, we all are in such different socioeconomic environments right now that it's important to bring out these different aspects of what our environments look like and what our different opinions are. So thank you so much for bringing out these important points, and I do wish that all of your initiatives do get that um, do get heard the way that it should be. I thank you for being on this panel today, and I hope that we are able to connect after this as well. Thank you so much, Alakshi, Vasundra, Prakshi, and Mitali for being on board today. And yeah, Prakshi was saying something.
No, thank you. Thank you so much for inviting us and creating this conversation, which was so important.
Yes,
Yes, I do believe
thank you,
this.
Tanya. This was really
Thank you
great.
so
I didn't get
much.
to talk to my rest of the panelists a lot, but it's just like stellar work all of them are doing. So thank
Yeah,
you
I've met
guys.
Yes,
a Lakshi. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I believe all three of you actually know each other. I think that's the space is so small at this point that everyone knows each other and who's
We know
doing what.
Mitali
So I
also.
think, oh,
We
that's
know
great.
Mitali also.
That's great. Great, everyone. I really hope that we're able to create some meaningful conversations going forward. Thank you so much for being on the panel today. And with that, I would like to say thank you for all the listeners today, all of us listening in. And also, I would like to point out that being at a social impact level, I think it's important that we also realize that this needs to be talked about more. We need to share the relevant information, whether it's with the workers who are in our house, whether it's people that or women we meet in other areas and other walks of our life. So I really hope that this message gets across on Menstrual Hygiene Day. A very happy Menstrual Hygiene Day to everyone. And we at Daily Hunt and MASH hope that we are able to create more meaningful and impactful conversations in the future as well. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining in.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.